when the stats that I cited, to include the 23,000 arrests, 6,000 weapons seized, 1,600 gang and criminal enterprise organizations, 4,700 children found and rescued, more enough fentanyl seized to kill a third of America. The men and women of the FBI are now on an apolitical mission, and this is why the numbers are historic.
Have you fired people because they voted for Vice President Harris?
I don't ask people who they vote for, and neither does the FBI.
Okay. But you've given people polygraphs, have you not?
Many people in the FBI take polys.
The FBI does that all the time.
Yes, sir.
Does it not?
Yes, sir.
For a long time, is that correct?
Decades.
The most powerful law enforcement agency in the United States just told Congress it is finally apolitical. And then, under oath, it said things that raise even more questions about politics, power, and the limits of what the public is allowed to know. What happened in this hearing wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, technical, procedural, and buried inside the transcript are contradictions that only appear when you read the words slowly. This is not about rhetoric. It is about the written record. And by the end, the question won't be whether the FBI has changed, but whether it ever could. Something unusual happened during this exchange. On the surface, the FBI director presented historic crime-fighting statistics: arrests, weapons seizures, child rescue operations, massive fentanyl seizures, numbers designed to project competence and neutrality. Then the conversation turned. A senator asked about political bias, firings, polygraphs, a taxpayer-funded settlement involving 2 former FBI employees accused of political misconduct, and then, unexpectedly, about the Epstein files. 3 different topics tied together by one theme: whether the FBI is political and whether the public is getting the full story. The hearing begins with success stories: a suspected assassin captured in 33 hours, another suspect apprehended within 48, a tone of congratulation establishing the Bureau as effective and fast, before the questions pivot to controversy. The director emphasizes tens of thousands of arrests, thousands of weapons seized, thousands of children rescued, describing an apolitical mission. And then the first question arrives: have you fired people because they voted for Vice President Harris? The answer is simple. The FBI does not ask employees how they vote, but the follow-up changes the tone.
Mr. Director, you and the FBI, working with state and local law enforcement officials in Utah, have caught the assassin of Mr. Charlie Kirk. Is that right?
We have a suspect, yes, sir.
And you did that within 48 hours, did you not?
33 hours.
33 hours. Congratulations. We've had other political assassinations. Back in June, an assassin assassinated Representative Melissa Hoffman, Mr. Hoffman, Senator John Hoffman, and Mrs. Hoffman in Minnesota. You and the FBI and Minnesota state and local law enforcement officials caught the assassin within 48 hours, did you not?
I believe that timeline's correct, Senator.
Congratulations. Sometimes we miss the forest for the trees. Good work. Did Mr. Kirk's assassin act alone?
As I've said since the beginning, Senator, it is very much an ongoing investigation, and I can't speak to the state charges. That's for the state to address on their own, but we are providing them with the same investigatory findings we're parting the department. And as I noted to Senator, I believe it was Cornyn or Hawley, that there are a number of individuals that are currently being investigated and interrogated, and a number yet to be investigated and interrogated specific to that chat room. So we are very much in our ongoing posture of investigation.
So others could have been involved?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I asked you this last time you were here. Kash, you remember Mr. Peter Strzok and Ms. Lisa Page?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Strzok was an FBI agent. Ms. Page was an FBI lawyer. They were both very aggressive anti-Trump political activists who allowed their political opinions to affect their work at the FBI. Is that a fair statement?
I believe their text messages and their testimony that was secured by the OIG and DOJ speak for themselves.
In fact, Mr. Strzok and Ms. Page were having an extramarital affair, and at one point, Ms. Page texted Mr. Strzok, quote, "Trump's not ever going to be president, right? Right?" And Mr. Strzok replied, No, he won't. We will stop it," end quote. Ms. Page resigned from the FBI. Mr. Strzok was fired. They promptly sued the federal government and the FBI and Justice Department for releasing their emails, which revealed all of this. The FBI settled that lawsuit for $1.2 million, gave Mr. Strzok $1.2 million cash, gave Ms. Page, who resigned. She wasn't fired, she resigned, she quit. Gave her $800,000. Who, if the FBI made that decision to give them money?
That settlement was reached in the Biden administration when my predecessor was the director.
Who? Are you saying that Chris Wray did?
The only people that can decide that settlement are the Attorney General in conjunction with the director and the administration.
Have employees been given polygraphs? Yes, many take them. The FBI has done so for decades. A subtle implication that the Bureau may not ask about voting, but does investigate internal loyalty and conduct. Then the conversation shifts to two former FBI figures accused of political bias whose messages became public, whose careers ended, and who later sued the government. The senator asks who authorized the settlement paying them more than $1 million taxpayer dollars. The answer is procedural. The settlement was approved by leadership during the previous administration, the Attorney General, the FBI Director, the administration itself. The narrative presented is that the FBI was once politicized and is now fixed. Yet the settlement complicates that narrative because if these individuals represented politicization, why was the government willing to pay them to resolve a lawsuit? The director says he is committed to ensuring politicization never happens again. But when asked whether the Bureau had been weaponized, he answers personally, saying he knows what weaponization feels like. That is not a denial. It is a reframing, and that distinction drives the rest of the hearing. The questioning escalates as the senator asks whether the FBI was politicized under the previous administration. The answer? The matter is still being investigated. Language that signals openness without commitment. Then the hearing takes an unexpected turn to the Epstein files, and the stakes change dramatically. A simple question is asked: did Epstein traffic young women to anyone else? The answer is precise. There is no credible information in the case file that he trafficked to other individuals. But seconds later, the director explains the investigation had been limited by a prior non-prosecution agreement and constrained by legal restrictions. Those two statements now exist side by side. No credible information about others, and an investigation that was limited and constrained. The hearing transforms from policy discussion into a logic puzzle, because if the investigation was limited, what does the absence of evidence actually mean? The Bureau says it will release everything it is legally permitted to release, but court orders restrict full disclosure, and judges decline to lift those restrictions. This is not dramatic revelation, but procedural barrier. Yet procedural barriers often shape public understanding more than dramatic revelations ever do. Evidence cannot be released, but conclusions are drawn from available evidence, and that contradiction sits quietly in the transcript. The turning point arrives when the director states that, based on available files, there is no credible evidence of trafficking to others, while acknowledging the files are incomplete and constrained by past decisions. The public is being asked to trust conclusions drawn from a record officials admit is incomplete, and suddenly the hearing is no longer about statistics or settlements, but about the limits of institutional knowledge. From one perspective, the FBI is operating within the law, constrained by court orders, following evidence and legal process, settlements being legal decisions rather than political endorsements. From another perspective, critics see patterns. Settlements paid to controversial figures, investigations described as limited, files that cannot be fully released, carefully framed answers under oath. Both interpretations can exist simultaneously, which is why this hearing matters. Public trust in federal law enforcement shapes everything from jury trials to national security policy, and trust is not built through statistics alone, but through consistency. When statements appear to conflict, even subtly, confidence erodes. What happens next is predictable yet uncertain. More document releases within legal limits, continued investigations into politicization with unclear timelines, ongoing debate about transparency versus confidentiality. Watch whether courts revisit disclosure restrictions, whether additional settlements or internal investigations become public, and whether congressional oversight intensifies, because oversight rarely ends with one hearing, it expands. This hearing did not produce explosive headlines, but it produced something more enduring, a transcript filled with careful language, unresolved tension, and unanswered questions. The FBI says it is apolitical, yet the written record shows a more complicated reality, and in Washington, the written record is what lasts.